Hey there, YouTube. This is Patrick. I want to start off by saying thank you so much for all your support. I've received all the comments, and I'm really glad that you guys are enjoyed that first episode of Mix Breakdown where we covered Wage War Low. And today we're actually going to be doing episode 2, which is going to be Memphis May Fire Only Human. I recently recreated this song, and I have a copy of that mix if you guys want to hear it. It's in my YouTube channel. Just go ahead and go to that video, and that way you can hear what that sounds like. But today we're going to be going over of how I was able to recreate that song, and also what are the different plugins that I use to get that final mix. Now, before we get started, a couple things I want to mention here really quickly. To start off, I see that a lot of you guys are watching the videos, leaving comments and such. However, we want to be able to grow the community. So if you guys are enjoying these videos, please do me a favor, consider subscribing, leaving likes on the videos. We want to be able to get these videos recommended to other people that might also enjoy them as well, okay? So please, again, just consider subscribing. We got more content coming out. We'll be doing more mixed breakdown videos on all the previous songs I've done, and I have new songs that that I'm going to be recreating that are in the pipeline that we're going to be doing mixed breakdowns for. So a ton of content. It's a great opportunity to be able to learn and sharpen your mixing skills. Now, thing number 2, as you guys may know, the channel is still growing. We're at 1,000 subscribers, and if you guys want to show a way to be able to support me, you guys can go ahead and look. I have all the handles at the bottom of the screen there. You can join my Patreon. It's just to support what it is that we're doing here. So if you could do that, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Whatever you guys can do. Honestly, I'm just happy that you guys are coming even to the YouTube channel and enjoying them. But that's just the cherry on top. Now, the last thing, before we actually get started here, what you want to make sure that you actually do is go and download the resource files. I'll have them down in the description of this video, and they're also in the link of the video where I posted for the mix as well for Memphis May Fire Only Human. So you want to make sure you download those files, because that's going to contain all the MIDI, all the waveform files, or excuse me, the tracks, audio tracks. I can't English today. My bad, guys. And then lastly, it's going to have the Pro Tools section. And this gives you 3 different opportunities to be able to join along with us here. You can either use your own sample packs if you would like to, in case you want to change the drums or the guitar libraries and such, or maybe some of the other synths that we plan to be using in this session, or you can use the ones that I have provided with you, or do a blend of the both. So it gives you a lot of opportunities. So again, before we actually get started here, make sure you have all those files downloaded and you prepare and have them loaded up in your DAW. And with that said, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so the first thing we actually want to do is go ahead and take a look at what sample libraries we use in order to recreate this song. So before we do any additional processing or anything else, let's go ahead and just take a quick second to look at the libraries that we use in order to, again, recreate this song. So let's start off with the kick and snare. So we're actually using this Tony Royster Jr. drum kit that's from Mixlabs. It's an excellent sounding library. Let's go ahead and just take a quick listen to what these samples sound like, starting with the kick. I mean, and it already sounds great on its own. Let's listen to the snare. And just to show you here that that is what we're using for snare, I'll jump over to this instance of Contact, and of course that's it here. Now, you also may notice that these are going to be the wave files here. We'll get to them in a second. Again, this is just right now. I just want to show you what samples we're using. And also a quick note on the snare. This is going to be the aluminum snare. In case you happen to have this sample pack and you want to know which one we're using, it's this one. All right, next, let's jump over to the toms. So for toms, we're actually using an older Joey Sturgis drum kit. We're just using the toms from it. It's from the Truth Custom Black and Gold, and they sound good. Let's take a quick listen. Sound great, have a lot of boobiness, still have a little bit of snap to it as well. Really like them. Now, let's go ahead and look at the cymbals. For cymbals here, we actually have another Joey Sturgis library. This is going to be the Master 1 cymbals. Now, as you can see, this is loaded with a ton of cymbals, but we're not using all these for the session. But let's just run through what cymbals are included in this library. So first off, we have a 14-inch hi-hat. Looks like we have, what is this, a 19-inch crash, and that's going to be on the left. Then we have a middle crash, which is going to be a 20-inch. We have a crash on the right-hand side, also a 20-inch. We have a 21-inch ride. Let's see, China, that's 19 inches. We have 2 bells, one a 7, one a 6, and then 5 splashes. One is a 9-inch. We have 3 10-inch, and then an 11-inch as well. So again, remember, we're not going to be using all of these, but it's just what's included in this library pack. And what I'm going to do here is just solo these cymbals here really quickly. Again, no other processing is going on, so that way you can just hear the raw samples. Let's play right here these 2 different sections. So this, I believe, is going to be some crash and hi-hat. Let's take a listen. And this is going to China. There you go. So that way you can hear a little bit of the variety of the cymbals. You'll be able to hear a little bit more as we go on through the mix. So next up is going to be the bass. Let's go ahead and take a quick look here. This here is the Grove Bass by Submission Audio. Now, if you remember in the last video for Wage War Low, I used DjinnBass, and I really like it a lot. I really do. However, I also did say that if I were going to recreate that song again, I would probably use a different library pack. Probably one like this, like the Grove Bass. This is an excellent sounding library. It's a 6-string bass. I believe this is actually the bass that the bass player from Intervals uses. So, but it sounds awesome. So let's go ahead and just solo this really quickly and take a listen to what that sounds like. Yeah, that sounds great. So, as you can also see, we're using the DI right here. We're not using any of these other tones here because we are going to add Parallax, which is going to be a plugin by Neural DSP that's going to be doing the amp simulation. Now, if you don't have one, you can simply just use one of these. It'll be fine for a replacement. But for me, I personally like to use an amp sim and leave these libraries just as the DI. So, okay, let's go ahead and look at the guitars. We got 3 of them here. Now, all 3 of them are using the same library, but different presets. So we have Odin 2. I talked about this in the last video. I really like Odin 2. I think it's the best that is out there. Shreddage is also another really good one that I started using again as well, kind of in conjunction with Odin. But by far, this is for me what I feel is the cream of the crop, Odin 2. So for the rhythm guitars, because they're rhythms, we're going to have a stereo pair left and right. You want to make sure that you have this on the pan rhythm expanded preset, and that's going to play the same performance. Well, excuse me, the same composition, right? The same notes, but a slightly different performance is giving us that stereo effect. So let's go ahead and solo this here and take a listen to what that sounds like. And let's hear it in the chorus too. And again, as you can hear, it does a really good job at that as well. So, okay, now that we've covered the rhythm, let's go ahead and look at the center guitar. Now, the center guitar in this song is going to be for like the intro, where it's playing that beginning riff before it actually jumps into like the first verse, and also in these transition pieces, like you can see here, where it leads from that verse into the first chorus. So this again is going to be Odin, but instead of using the rhythm, we're going to be using a guitar 1, which is just going to give us a mono performance. So I'll play just the beginning really quickly so that way you can hear what that sounds like. Yep, and again, that one guitar just right in the center. Next is going to be our clean guitar. Let's go ahead and take a look. Again, we're using Odin 2, but now we're using guitar 2. So let's take a quick listen to this. Yeah, awesome. Okay. That covers our guitars. Now let's go ahead and take a quick look at some of our synths and sound effects that we're going to be using here. So I'll go ahead and just take the mute off of everything here except my audio files down here. Let me also turn this off, this group track here. So let's look at actually these electric drums. So in the beginning of the song, it might be easier for me just to play this here. You might remember the beginning kind of sounding like this. Now this isn't going to have an amp sim on the guitar, so excuse that, but just to familiarize yourself. Maybe if I solo the right guitar, it will work. All right, so as you can hear there, that's just electronic drums that are playing right at the very beginning with that intro guitar. So I have the MIDI here, and I used a drum library called Electroacoustic. That is a contact library. Now, I will say I use this out of convenience because I just happen to have it. You can use whatever samples you want. If you want to replace these with your own, or if you have different contact sample packs, please do so. It's all right, because I know this library is probably not going to be one that everyone has. So again, have the freedom to practice and try new things. So let's go ahead and see what I did though. If you happen to have this sample pack, what are the different drums that I use? So starting with the electric kick, we have the SDS 800 kick. For the snare, we have the 808 snare. For the hi-hat, we are using the 606 hi-hat. And then for the toms, we're using the Lin toms, okay? So that covers the electric drums. Let's go ahead and go into, I'm gonna change it up here. I wanna look at the pad and choir first. I don't wanna look at these yet, the impacts yet, because that goes along with our effects. So let's take a look here at these other synthesizers. So let's look at the pad first. Now, to be honest, I don't think pad is a good name for this. This is more of a plucking synthesizer rather than a pad. I think just because it was under the category of pad. That's why I labeled it that way. But this is Dense Droplets by Spitfire Audio from their Enigma library. What I'm going to do is, this is -20. I'm going to turn it up to 0 so that way we can go ahead and hear what that sounds like. Excellent. Let's go ahead and drop that back down to 20. And that, if you can see here, is going to be playing along with the clean guitar later. So that's going to be kind of in the background. So hence why that's so quiet. Now, let's go ahead and look at the choir that is playing in conjunction with that. And that's going to be Cinesamples. I believe this is called Voice of War, Men of the North. And it's just a choir that's going to be playing along with those that plucking sound. So let's take a listen. I gotta say, I really like what Cinesample makes. They make some really good libraries. There's other really great ones out there, but especially this choir, it sounds really, really good. All right, now finally, let's go ahead and take a look at the effects that we're gonna be using. So you can see here, we actually kind of have a blend of MIDI and also some samples that I loaded in as well. So let's go ahead, finish off with the MIDI, and then, or finish up with the MIDI, and then we'll move into those other samples. So I have two impacts. One is more of a cinematic hit, and then impact B is going to be a Bram. If you don't know what a Bram is, I'll explain what that is in a moment. Let's look at the first one though. I'm gonna go ahead and solo it. And this is the Phoenix library, again, another Contact library. It's just, again, it's another hit that's gonna provide a lot of impact. We're using it in sections of the song, so like at the beginning, going out, or from the intro into the first verse, and it looks like, again, a couple times, maybe through the chorus and throughout maybe some breakdowns as well. So let's actually, I wanna jump to a section where all these different hits are happening. So let's look at this section right, actually here. Yeah, this is a good spot. So let's take in a listen to this. I went ahead and turned up the volume, so here we go. Sounds really, really good. All right, let's go ahead and drop that volume back down. Let's look at impact number 2. So impact number 2, like I said, is a Bram. And I said I would explain what this is, so let's go ahead and do that. A Bram is like a low sounding horn or synthesizer that you pair with, with those cinematic hits to add a little bit more density and dramatic effect to it. And you guys have actually probably heard this before. If you've even, whether you watch the movie or the trailer for the movie Inception, you've heard these in the soundtrack. So I'm gonna go ahead and bring this up to 0. We're gonna go ahead and just listen to it on its own, and then with the cinematic hit. Yeah, sounds really cool. I'm sure you guys probably remember what that sound is or what it is that I'm referring to. Now what I'm gonna do is go ahead and play these two sounds together. They're both turned down, but at least you'll be able to hear them in conjunction, what they're doing with each other. Yeah, so you can imagine during a breakdown what that will sound like. And in the last video, we used a bass drop for those moments where we wanted to be a little bit more cinematic and, again, dramatic. However, as I'm continuously growing as a mixing engineer, I want to try out different sounds. We want to try to quote unquote Michael Bay our music whenever it's appropriate, I should say. So these are different ways that you can do it. So don't be afraid to try out, these libraries where they have these like different trailer hits and impacts and stuff that might just give your song a little bit more of a uniqueness, or your mixes. So, okay, to go along with these now. So this covers the MIDI. These 3 tracks, like I said, are audio tracks where I imported certain samples in and lined them up at different times where I thought they would be appropriate. So we have a gunshot. The next one is going to be a reverse cymbal. right? So kind of the swelling reverse cymbal effect leading into that breakdown. And it's called the sliding rack. It's like the sound of a gun loaded or being cocked. So what I want to do is actually play all 5 of these sounds together so that way you can hear what they sound like. So let's start back a little bit and take a quick listen to what that is. Again, we're just Michael Baying the crap out of this song, but it's going to sound good, I promise. So that covers actually all of the samples and sound sources that we're going to be using. So now the next step is to do the fun part, which is going to be mixing. So let's go ahead and get started. Great. So we actually went ahead and just disabled all of the MIDI tracks. We're just doing that to reserve some CPU utilization, make sure that we're not going to, make the PC work harder than it needs to, especially while we're recording this video. So it's a nice thing just to do to make sure, again, that if you're not using a certain library or anything, go ahead and disable it. Give your computer a fair chance to be able to provide the best result for you, and that way it doesn't struggle on you. But now let's go ahead and start mixing here. So we turn off my groups. We're going to start looking at the kick. And let's just go ahead and highlight this section right here. It's kind of a long section that we want to kind of loop over to listen to the drums being played. So let's take a listen one more time to remind ourselves what that kick sounds like. Might also be good if I turn off some of these other auxes. Now let's take a listen to it again. All right, again, already a great sounding kick, but we're gonna go ahead and try to see what we can do to get it to work with the other elements of the song. So first thing that we're doing, like we did in the other video, we're gonna take away everything below 30 Hertz. Now this can be adjusted accordingly, whatever you think is best, but the idea is to remove that energy that's not being really heard that we think might make the rest of the song MIDI when we start introducing other elements. So again, everything below 30 Hertz, gone. And it looks like we just did a slight cut here at 143 Hertz of minus 1.5 dB. And that's it, as simple as that. We didn't do anything else so far on this. I'll get to what we're doing on these sends in a second. Right now, I just want to focus on these first 4 elements of the drum, and then we'll go ahead and look into that. Next is going to be the snare. So for the snare, we started off with our EQ, did something similar. We went ahead and cut off everything below 35 Hertz. We could turn it up. However, this was the result that I got from when I was doing the recreation, and it sounded good. Again, you can adjust this accordingly, but at least from what I see here in my settings, everything below 35, we took it away. It looks like we have 2 cuts. One is more of a narrow cut, the other a little bit more of a wider band. So let's start with the narrow one. It looks like we're doing minus 3 dB, and that's at 2034 Hertz. I think that's just to kind of tame a little bit of the snappiness of the snare. Again, I really like snares, but I want to make sure that they're not distracting from the other elements of the song. We want to make sure it's in your face, but it's not just, again, a distraction. And then next, again, we have more of a wider band, which is going to be taking away 1.47 dB, and that's at 2,369 Hertz. So let's go ahead and take a quick listen to what that sounds like. Let's take this section here and take a quick listen. Let's do without, and let's also solo this too. We'll listen to it with the kick in just a second. All right, and again. So very subtle, but again, just kind of trying to tame some of those frequencies. Let's actually take another section here where we might have some louder hits. So let's try like right here. So as you can probably hear, sorry about that. So as you can probably hear, it is going ahead and just kind of pulling back those frequencies a little bit, just that way they're not poking out too much, for lack of a better term. Next is going to be our multi-band compressor. So just like the last video, I'm going to run through these bands pretty quickly here. If you need to slow down the video, go to the YouTube playback, make sure to slow down the video, or you can always pause the video at certain sections so that way you can see what settings I'm using. So we have the 5 bands, starting with the first one. The threshold is at 0, so I don't think we're doing any compression at all on the lower band. But we also have the attack at 20, release at 20. The next band, we have a threshold of negative 16.27 with an attack of 20, release of 20. The threshold on the third band is going to be negative 20.22, attack of 49.1 and a release of 11.9. Fourth band is going to be a threshold of negative 31.25, an attack of 47.7, release is going to be 19.6, and then the last band is going to be a threshold of negative 24.58, with an attack of 50.1 and a release of 11.7. Sometimes I trip over my own tongue. Sorry, guys. I get a little excited about this, and I go even too fast for myself. But that is going to be, again, just kind of trying to tame certain bands and frequencies. So let's take a listen to what it sounds like without and with. So when playing this back, you can visually see that it's kind of taming the more of the body of the snare a little bit, and then also these other bands where some of the more of the higher mids and highs are as well. And that is it for our snare. Again, it's a really good drum pack, so we don't really have to do too much. It's just making it work with our mix is really all we're doing with this library. So our toms now. Let's go ahead and go to this fill and take a quick listen to this by itself. Awesome. Okay. And what we're doing first is an EQ, everything below 35, just like the snare, we're getting rid of. And then we're doing a few different cuts here. And then we're also doing we're increasing the volume a little bit here as well. So left to right, everything below 35, gone. The next band is going to be minus 1.8 dB at 143 hertz. We then have minus 3.27 at 230 hertz, minus 1.31 dB, and that's going to be at 685, and then minus 1.88 at 877, and then a gain of 1 dB, and that's going to be at 3,438. So this is kind of looks like it's taming more some of the body of the mix or the mids of it, and then giving it a little bit more of a snap. So let's take a quick listen without and then with. With. There you go. So you guys can kind of hear what I'm doing there. Next, what's on our list? So it looks like we're using an 1176 in order to control the dynamics of it. So let's run through these parameters here. So starting with the input, negative 32.6, an output of 27. Attack is going to be 3. Release is going to be at 5.93. The ratio is going to be at 4. And an important thing with this specific plugin, the Waves plugin, it's set to the blue ribbon, the bluey. Do not forget that, okay? There is a total different sonic sound difference that you're going to experience when you are switching between these two. So make sure it is on the blue ribbon. All right, let's take a quick listen. And you can hear they're actually significantly quieter. And I'll explain the reason for that in a little bit, but it has to do with these sends and what we're doing also with a parallel compression later. That's kind of the summary of it, but that's our toms. Next, let's go ahead and take a look at these cymbals here. Oh, my bad. So for our cymbals, we heard them earlier. We're going to go ahead and take this part, which I think it's mainly like crash, or it might be crash in hi-hat, but all we've done here is remove everything below 72. We don't need it. There's not much, audible information that's going on there. We can probably even afford to cut more, but for now, I just had it at 72, and this is what we're tracking with. So I'm not going to play that. I'll play these all at once because, again, that's just kind of a small thing that we're doing there. And we have another multi-band compressor. So let's take a look at what we're doing with this multi-band compressor. Again, left to right, lowest band first. So a threshold of negative 28. I think that's just really making sure that we don't have any of that low information in being audibly heard. We have a band of, or the attack of 20, the release of 20. Band number 2 is going to be a threshold of negative 18 with an attack of 20, release of 20. Third band is going to be negative 36.11 with an attack of 49.1 and a release of 11.9. Band number 4 is going to be negative 30.88, an attack of 41.9, and a release of 13.6. And then on the last band, we have negative 31.39, an attack of 41.4, and a release of 11.7. Let's take a quick listen to what that's doing. So you can hear that with all the drums, but it already sounds really good. You can see on the high end really clamping down on that hi-hat to make sure that the high ends of the hi-hat is not going to be distracting from everything else. Let's go ahead and listen with this other section that I believe has some China. Yeah, should be here. No, that's crash. Let's hear this other section. Let's find another section for us here. Maybe here. I'm already forgetting the composition of the song and when certain parts are playing, but now you heard it there, so great. Let's go ahead and now move on over to the drum reverb. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at the drum reverb and see what we're doing there. Now, to start, what we're actually going to do is flip over to the mixing view. So on the mixing view, we can see that we have a bunch of sends here on the drums that are being sent to both the reverb and the parallel drum. Again, right now, we're going to go ahead and focus on the reverb. So I have a send on the snare, the toms, and the cymbals. And what I'm doing here is just sending a certain amount of each one of these instruments into that send. Now you will notice that, again, I do not have a send that is going on here on the kick. And the reason for that is because, for me, at least with my experience, and maybe it's just my my skills as a mixing engineer, at least at this point in my life, I really don't. I struggle with trying to get a good sound, a drum reverb, with adding kick in there. Sometimes I will, but it's very subtle and quiet. It gets a little bit more of that kind of blossoming, booming sound into there, but most times I kind of get rid of it because the fact that I'm usually having to fight a lot with EQ to make it sound balanced and something that's usable, and that won't make the mix too muddy. So again, you can go ahead and add kick if you want to, but that's not what we did here for this mix. So with the snare, the send is at 0. It's also pre-fader. The toms is at -3, and then let's take a look at the cymbals. Cymbals looks like it's also at -3 as well. And again, these are all pre-fader. Let's go ahead and just listen to what this sounds like here. So as you can hear, sounds very much like our other drums, except for the kick. So now let's go ahead and look at the reverb that we selected to use for this track. So it looks like we are using the Lexicon, the MPX native reverb. The settings here is going to be the large plates, and it's going to be the large plate preset. And I've messed around a little bit with the settings here. So we'll go from left to right. So the reflection level is -85.5 dB. Reverb level is -0.5. The color is on light 1. The roll off is at 4,450. Diffusion at 100%. The reverb time is at 1.0955. The pre-delay is at 16 milliseconds, and the mix is at, of course, 100% because this is going to be a send. Now, I will say with reverb times, I've done a few different methods. One of the ones that I like to do is I'll go ahead and look what the BPM of a song is, and I'll go ahead and find out what the time is in milliseconds for quarter notes, half notes, eighth notes, whatever the case may be, and try to match that in the seconds or milliseconds, so that way the tail of, let's say, like a drum hit will end at a certain time. I'll show you guys that more in a later video, but let's go ahead and just hear what these drums sound like with these sends coming in now. So as you can hear, we have a reverb sound, but it's not like an extremely long tailing reverb. It's just, again, to add a little bit more energy and roominess to the drums than what we already have. Now, next, what I did here was I added a trim. Now, you might be wondering, why did you add a trim? Why didn't you just turn down on the fader? I've been getting more into the habit of where I just want to leave all my faders at 0 and then just adjust whatever the output is on my plugins. Actually, if you can see here in the cymbals, I forgot to mention this, we have a -2 decibel on the output of this plugin. And again, this is because I just don't want to really mess around with the faders. You can do whatever you want to do. This is just my thing, my personal thing that I'm doing right now. So, but that explains why the trim is there. Next, let's go ahead and look at the reverb that we're doing. So like I said, for me, I don't like dealing with the low end and how it impacts the sound of a reverb. So we went ahead and cut off everything below 72 Hertz, and then we took out some of these lows. It looks like 3.1 dB at 298. So let's take a listen to what that sounds like. And as you can probably hear, for me, it sounds like it's a bit more controlled. So when the reverb comes in, it's not making the rest of the drum sound drowned out. So that covers the drum reverb. Now let's go ahead and move into the parallel drums. So we'll go ahead and solo this. Now, the parallel drums is a little bit of a different story, as you can see here. We actually have a send not just on the kick, snare, tom, and cymbals, but I also did it for the drum reverb as well. And that way we can kind of create that sound of really everything being crushed together, and then we blend it in. As you can see here, this is the only track that I actually have the fader turned down. I could have done the trim. Why I decided to break my own rule, I don't know, but I did. So let's take a listen to what these drums sound like going into the parallel drum send. All right, and you can kind of hear it's kind of quiet. Let me turn it up a little bit. And you can hear with that drum reverb now, it's giving it a little bit more space and roominess, so it sounds really good. Let's also go over what the mix levels are on the parallel drum. So parallel drum for the kick, as you can see, it's -12. I like to add it in there, but I like to be very conservative with it. For our snare, a little bit of a different story. We have -4, so we definitely can hear more of that. Toms, also -4. Our cymbals can be a bit aggressive and a bit harsh, especially with compressors wanting to pull, or try to control the dynamics, and you hear more of that high-end brittleness frequencies. Again, I'm trying to find somewhere in the middle, like between the kick and the snare. And lastly, our drum verb, it's at 0, and why you can hear that reverb so clearly with all these other drums. So next, what is going to be the first plugin here on the parallel drums? We're using QClone again. This is what I mentioned before in the other video. QClone is just going to be essentially a snapshot of an EQ setting, and this is going to be coming from an API strip. If you don't have QClone or you can't get access to this type of library, you can always switch this out with a console emulation like Slate Digital's Mix Rack, or using the Waves NLS, and I'm sure there's a ton of other ones. Again, I don't think it will be detrimental if you don't have any of those 3 options, whether it's this or the other 2 I mentioned. However, it's nice to add a little bit of some of this color. I feel like it can glue the drums together a little bit. So let's take a listen what it sounds like with, or without, and with. And I'll turn this up for now, so that way you can hear what all these plugins are doing, and then I'll turn it down at the end. So for me, I feel like it's adding a little bit more body to it, so it sounds good. Now, let's go ahead and look at the compressor. This is going to be, parallel compression that we're doing. So let's take a look. We're using the V-Comp by Waves. Let's run through these parameters. So we have -6 on the input. Output is going to be at 0. Analog is off. Compression, of course, is on. We have a 6:1 ratio. The release is on auto. There's no de-esser that's on. Release is on auto. Attack is on fast. Limit level's on 12, but the limiter's off anyway. So actually this section doesn't really matter. It's more so this section is what we're worried about. So let's listen without and with. So definitely adding some energy here. And you know what? Just for you guys, so that way I'm not breaking my own rule, I'm gonna go ahead and set this to -15. So it's the same thing as me turning down the fader. Again, shame on me for that. All right, so that is now all the drums, the reverb, and the parallel compression, or the P drums. Sometimes I like to label them as. Let's go ahead and hear what all of these sound like together. Yeah, they sound great to me. All right. So last thing for the drums is going to be the drum sum. So what's happening is we've taken all of these elements of the drums, including the kick, snare, tom, cymbals, the reverb, and the parallel compression, and we're now feeding all of those into our drum sum that is then going into our master. But we're going to do a little bit of processing before we send it to the master. So what we have is another compressor. This is going to be the Slate Digital. This is the VBC FG Gray. I don't know. Sometimes these names, I think they're a little weird, but that's the name of it. And we're doing some compression here. Like I said, let's look at what we have. The attacks, left from right. The attack is going to be 10. The release is going to be 0.2. The threshold is set to -9. The ratio is 4%. Looks like we're doing a roll off so that we're not catching or compressing too much on the low end. We're not triggering the compressor to go off when it catches those lower frequencies. So that roll off is going to be at 30. Our makeup gain is at 0 and our mix is at 100%. So let's take a quick listen again. And as you can see there, really that's more so just controlling those transient of the snare, just trying to balance those dynamics. It's not really being triggered by any other element of the drums. So that's a good thing to know, that it's just trying to control those few transients that are cutting through, that it's not being compressed over here. We're just trying to make the rest of the drum sound more even. Another thing I want to do, let's go ahead and take a look at the toms really quickly. I want to see if this is affecting that at all. I want to see how much louder the toms are now with the parallel compression. So let's listen to this fill again. All right, so that's the toms. I actually think we can afford to turn them up a little bit. So let's go ahead and jump back there really quickly and do so. So I'm gonna solo the toms. This is at -27. Let's do negative, what is it? 24, yep, 24. And let's take a listen to these now. Okay, it's a little better. I think we can do a little bit more. You have 22. Okay, maybe a little bit too much at that point. So let's go back to -24. We'll call it a day, at least for right now, and then we'll go ahead and adjust accordingly. But congratulations, we are now done with the drums. So we're gonna move on to the next part, the bass. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with the bass now. So for the bass, again, we use the Grove bass, I should say, by Submission Audio. We had the DI. So first in our line is going to be the Parallax plugin by Neural DSP. Again, another amp sim that sounds really good. If you saw the last mix breakdown, you're not going to be surprised that we have this here. We are using a different preset though. Before we use, I believe, is All Our Bass Abandoned Us. Again, that was the Archetype preset. Now this one's called A Feared. Don't know if that's a play on anything. If it is, someone let me know in the comments, so that way I get to learn something today. Let's go ahead and take a listen to what this sounds like on its own. Yeah, sounds really, really good to me. Now, when it comes to bass, I'll be honest with you. My process to finding a really good bass sound is just finding a preset I like. Maybe occasionally, maybe, I don't know, 10% of the time, I might mess with a certain parameter, but most of the times, again, it's just picking a preset that I like, that I feel that best suits the song. So for example, we are using a different preset because I feel this one had the appropriate type of tone and energy for this song. So, okay. The only thing we want to make sure, we want to run through here, is our input is 0, gate is -80. Doesn't matter if it's stereo or mono in this situation, because of the fact, again, we are using a mono performance. We can, though, however, set this oversampling to high, as long as our CPU can, as long as our CPU can handle it. So we'll go ahead and leave it as that. If we start to have any problems later with the CPU, we'll go ahead and put that back down to normal, but for now, we'll leave it as is. Great. So that is the first plugin. Let's look at the next plugin. This here is going to be another EQ. We're going to do the same thing, cut everything below a certain frequency. We've elected to use 40 as where we're going to cut everything below. We then have -3.59 at 220 hertz, so it's taking a little bit away of the body. And then we also have a sharp Q that we're moving -2 dB, and that's at 3,500 hertz. And that's probably just from any frequencies that just might be sticking out a little bit too much and that are distracting. So let's go ahead and take a listen to it. This is without. All right, and you guys get the general idea. This is just making sure that we're cleaning the tone up a little bit, so that way it works well in the mix. Next is going to be, again, it's going to be a console emulation. We're using QClone, adjust it for your situation, whatever you need to do, using the same API preset. I love this preset. I think it's the only one I ever use with QClone. I'm sure there's others out there. If you guys actually know of any good QClone preset library packs out there to download, please let me know. Maybe we can make a video of going through those different library packs. And then let's go ahead and play with or without and with. It's got some good low end. It's still got some great crunch to it, and it's aggressive sounding metal bass. What more can you ask for? All right, last plugin in the chain here. Looks like we're using actually a reverb, which you might be wondering, what the heck, Patrick? Why are you using a reverb on bass? Didn't you just say with the kick you don't like to add low frequency stuff to your to a reverb because it makes it muddy? Yes, it does. But if you look at this a little bit further, what we're actually doing is only adding 5% of the reverb into our mix. And the reason for this is something I learned from some of my previous teachers, is that when you have you know, a mix that you're doing that uses a lot of amp sims and stuff like that, it can sound a little bit too digital or sanitary, for lack of a better word. You want to add a little bit of variance to it. So one thing to make it sound more like it's a recorded performance rather than just like, you know, all these different DI tracks, which they are, is by adding just a little bit, just a touch of reverb. And when I say a touch of reverb, what we're doing here is we're not, look at the preset we're using. We're not using the hall, the church, the plate. We're using a room. So I'm going to actually turn this up to 100%, and that way you can hear what this sounds like at 100%. So it's not this super long tail like if we were to change this to the large or to anything else. We have it on room 2, small. And what we're going to go ahead and do is actually turn down the mix, so that way you can kind of get an understanding what it is I'm talking about. We want to make sure we're not getting rid of the integrity of the bass, but we want to add a little bit of reverb just to give it a little bit of space. And I just left it there at 8%, and you probably heard when I paused. Let's try to listen to it very carefully at the end. You can hear the tail end just so slightly. So we also do have a pre-delay of 9 milliseconds. I just stopped at 8. It was at 5 before. Let's go ahead and leave it at 8 and see if we like that or we think that it might be drowning it too much. Again, with reverb, we're losing a little bit of the attack of it. So we'll come back and adjust that accordingly. But so far, I like it there. All right. So the next section is going to be the guitar. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we did there. I lied. I apologize. Last thing I want to do is take a listen to what these different elements are sounding like together. So we finished the drums, we just finished the bass. Let's go ahead and reward ourselves and listen to what these two sound like together. So here we go. Sounds really, really good. And as you guys can see, while I was listening during playback, it did sound like the bass at 8% with the reverb was a little bit like losing its attack. So I went ahead and dropped that down to 5%. And what do you know? Again, we still have a little bit, or we still have a bass that sounds aggressive and it pokes out, but we get to keep a little bit of that reverb in there. Now let's go ahead and move on to the guitars. So for the guitars, for the rhythm we're starting with here, let's go ahead and look at the amp sim that we use. You guys can probably already guess, Neural DSP. And this is going to be the Archetype Gojira. The preset that we're using is going to be the Soaring Lead of Sauron. Now, this one is a lead, so I believe it did have the processing effects like delay and reverb at the end, but I disabled it. But again, just like the last video, we're going to run through all the different steps in the chain. So looks like our pedals here and the first ones are off. Next set of pedals here, off. Our amplifier, looks like the gain is going to be around 10, low at 10, mid looks like around 10, high is going to be about 1 o'clock, maybe 2 in between. It's going to be on this first tick here. Master is going to be at noon. Presence is actually going to be closer to about 11. Depth is going to be around 1, 2 o'clock, and the level is going to be at noon as well. Let's go ahead and take a look at the EQ. EQ, we do have some stuff we got going on here. So it looks like there's a boost of 1.6 dB at 65 Hertz, negative 2.4 dB at 125, negative 0.2 at 250, -1 at 500 hertz. At 1K, we have -0.7, 2K, nothing. 4K, we have a gain of 2.4 dB, nothing at 8K, and then nothing at 16K. Last thing we're going to do is, or actually second to last thing we're going to do is go ahead and look at the speakers here. Or for the cabinet. So we have a 57 on the left and a 414 on the right. For the 57, position of 0.3, distance is 0, level is at -12, and nothing else with these settings here. The 414, position of 0.666, and then distance also 666, double A, okay. And then the level is gonna be -19.7, nothing else that's been changed or altered here. And lastly, our effects, because it's gonna be a rhythm guitar, we went ahead and disabled it. So again, this was originally a lead, but I really liked the overall sound of it. I just, of course, wasn't appropriate to have these. So I say that to try different presets out. If you have some amp sim like this, try to see if you can find like a fundamental sound of it that you enjoy, and then alter it, change it. You know, just because it says it's a lead doesn't mean that it's, you know, written in stone that you have to use that way or you can't change it. So let's go ahead and take a listen to what our guitar sounds like with the amp sim. You know, I haven't played a guitar in probably more than 12 years, but it's things like this that makes me want to. Again, it just sounds really good. I like it. All right. So next plugin is going to be our EQ. So we're getting rid of everything below 60 hertz, and then we're also removing, I guess I'll call it a pinch harmonic, for maybe lack of a better term. Someone knows what's the proper way name of calling these types of frequencies, please let me know. I probably just haven't said it out loud in a long time, so I forgot the name of it. But we're doing -4 dB at 2,195 hertz, and that's it. Nothing else we're doing. Next is going to be a multi-band compressor. This is going to be another FabFilter plugin instance that we're using. What a surprise. So left to right, let's do this. -37.5, attack of, let's see, 50.1, release of -20. Second band is going to be -24.56, an attack of 49.8, and a release of 20. Third band is going to be -22.53, an attack of 49.6, and a release of 0. It's very fast. Okay. And then the fourth band is going to be -20.61, an attack of 47.2, and a release of 23.3. And the last band, we have -46.01, an attack of 37.3, and a release of 7.7. All right. So let's take a listen to what this sounds like now without and with. Excellent. So it's just controlling the dynamics, of course, within each one of these bands in a little bit of a different way, without the multi-band compressor. I mean, that guitar tone just rips. It sounds great, but we also want to make sure that it's being controlled with the other elements of the song. So that's what we're doing here. Let's go ahead and look at the next plugin here. Looks like Q Clone again, the API. Let's just take a quick listen with or without and with. So it's kind of giving back some of that warmth and low end energy that we took away, but it's sounding really good. And again, the reverb concept that I talked about earlier, we're just adding 5% of it just to give it a little bit of space to kind of move in. So let's take a listen to it. This is with, without. All right, and what I actually want to do now, this is a good point to be, or a good point in the song and the mix breakdown to be able to listen to what this sounds like without the reverb and with the reverb, and that way maybe you guys can leave me your opinion what you think sounds better with or without. So this is going to be both the bass and the rhythm guitars without the reverb. Let's take a listen. All right, and with. It's so subtle. It's so subtle, but for me, I feel it can make a little bit of a difference. So again, let me know whether you thought that made a difference. It didn't really matter, whatever the case may be. Interested to know you guys' opinion. But that covers the rhythm guitars. So next we're going to be looking at the clean guitar, or excuse me, the center guitar and then the clean guitar. All right, let's go ahead and look at the center guitar. So again, we are going to start with, what is this? Our amp sim. Yep. So this is going to be a different plugin. I told you guys, I love Neural DSP and I'm a huge fanboy of their stuff, but I do use other presets from other companies. And this is going to be by Aurora DSP Rhino. It's a really great sounding library as well. If I ever get bored of something that DSP makes, which is unheard of, but still, this is one of the plugins I'll go to, and it sounds really, really good. This is going to be their monstrous rhythm preset. Let me see if I can expand this so you can see it a little bit better. I usually like to conserve my, desktop real estate. So there we go. And these are going to be the settings for it. Let's just run through them really quickly before we press play. So the monstrous rhythm. So it looks like we have the model set to this third one. Let's see, low is on 0, mid is 0, treble is on 0, drive is set to scream and it's on 4. Mod section, I don't think we have anything that's on this because it's not a lead. Gate is at -55. Looks like we have a high pass filter and it's gonna be 30 Hertz is gonna be removed. We have our EQ section. It looks like this band is gonna be a gain of 2. The fourth band is gonna be -4. Nothing on these last two bands. And then we have this IR over here. So this looks like it's going to be set to flat. It's on IR4 and you can change this accordingly, but you have the res on 6 and the presence on 6. And then we have this at -6 dB and it looks like our limiter is set to -1. Now let's go ahead and take a listen to what it sounds like, just the DI and then with the amps in. Let me go ahead and solo this too. We'll hear in a second with the mix, but let's listen to it by itself. Yeah, sounds really, really good. All right, what's going to be the next plugin in the chain here? All right, so this is just gonna be a standard EQ because this is a center guitar. It's going to be, usually I like to use a telephone effect to kind of break it up a little bit. So let's go, if you guys don't remember from the other video, all we're doing here is we have a low pass and a high pass filter, and we're just making it really narrow, cutting a lot of the frequencies off to the side and boosting these mids here to have that telephone effect. Again, if you have Pro Tools, simply go over to this EQ, the EQ3 7 band, go to vocals and then select telephone. And then all you have to do is just adjust these bands accordingly to whatever is appropriate for that sound of the guitar. Again, if it's a low tune, you might have to, low tune guitar, you might have to adjust it a different way from a higher tuned guitar. So let's take a quick listen to what that sounds like. Oh, sorry, last thing, make sure you're adjusting your output so that way it's not too loud when it comes in and it's also not too quiet. It looks like here we did -2.5 dB. So let's take a quick listen. It's really awesome. I mean, that was a great sounding amp sim, but to go with this too, it's excellent also for the telephone guitar. Of course, it's good to use even by itself, not with a telephone guitar effect, but in this case, it sounds great. All right, next is going to be this is going to be a chorus, and this is going to be, which one is it? I can't remember who makes this one. Eventide makes this, I guess, but it's really good. I like it a lot. We're using just a little bit. You can see from the settings here, these are actually the settings that come standard with this plugin, but let's go ahead and just run through it. The mix is going to be 13%. We're only using very, very little of it. Rate is going to be at 0.77, depth 28, depth C center is going to be 28, and then also on the right is going to be 28. Delay is going to be 6.7 milliseconds. Detune, we're not doing anything here. Let's see, and the rest of this I think is all good. Yeah, this is set to off. So let's take a quick listen without and with. And that I think is just to give it a little bit of a stereo image there. And then let's lastly look at what we have here. This is going to be our reverb. This time we are using, again, a room, but we're using a medium-sized room and we're doing 25%. We want to give that a telephone effect to sound like it's kind of reverberating within a little bit of a bigger space. So let's take a listen to this. And this is always a good idea to do with telephone guitars sometimes, because telephone guitars are a very, very common sound. They're great, but you want to make sure sometimes it's not too upfront and in your face. So adding a little bit of reverb can just make it so that way you still get that really great sound that comes from the telephone guitar without being overbearing. So let's go ahead and hear what that sounds like in the mix between these two sections. And it sounds great. It's just carrying the song between that transition. Sounds really, really good. All right, next is going to be our clean guitar. Let's jump over to this section here. I'm going to solo it really quickly just to remind us what it sounds like. All right, and let's take a look at the amps in. And I know this is a clean guitar, but I think this still has some gain and grit to it. But let's take a look here. So I know, I'm sorry guys, another neural DSP, but what can I say? It's good stuff. All right, so we have the Archetype Corey Wong. This looks like this is the gardening preset. Now I believe I did some fiddling around with this here. So let's start from left to right. So the first set of pedals are deactivated. The second set though, it looks like we have the compressor, it is on. Blend, let's see, that's about 2 o'clock there. The tone is at between 1 and 2. The compression is at 2, and the volume is at about noon. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the amp itself. So volume is almost at 100%. I would say it's probably closer to about maybe I don't know. Maybe it's it doesn't look like it's completely all the way up, but maybe just one notch before that. The bright setting is enabled. Bass is, I would say, at 11. Mids are between 9 and 10. Treble, I would say, is closer to about 2. Presence are also around 2. And the output level looks like it's at about 11. All right, and then let's look at our EQ here. So for the EQ, we have minus 2.4 at 65 hertz. We have a gain of 1.3 at 125 hertz. Nothing at 250. 500 hertz, though, we do have a gain of 1.4. 1K, 1.5. Minus 3.6 dB at 2K, and then minus 0.3 at 4K, and then nothing for the last two bands over here. Our cabinet section, I don't believe I mess around with this at all, but let's go ahead and just look at it. We have a ribbon 121 on the left, and then we have our AKG 414 on the right-hand side. So on the left, we have a position of 0.328, distance is 0.22, level is negative 5.9. Nothing else messed around with these settings. The other microphone, we have a position of 0.254, a distance of 0.037. Sorry, this text is a little hard to read. I'm actually going to turn it up a little bit here. There we go. Much easier for me to read. Level is negative 17.5. Nothing with these last ones. And then let's look. It looks like we have the effects section. They're disabled, and we're not even using them, which makes sense because we're going to be adding our own processing. In fact, let me just go ahead and bypass it if we're not going to use it. So let's take a listen to what this clean guitar tone sounds like as it is right now. All right, so again, it still has a bit of a crunchy sound to it, but it's not going to be as high gain as, like, let's say our rhythm guitars. So, all right, next section here. Our EQ, we're getting rid of everything below 60. We then have minus 1.7 dB at 310 hertz, minus 1.96 dB at 425 hertz. We have minus 1.89 dB at 635, negative 2.86 dB at 813, and we're taking out a notch here of negative 4, and that's at 2,195. Let's take a quick listen. Without. So kind of taking away those mids a little, the mids a little bit, trying to just control it. Let's take a look what's the next plugin is. Another multi-band compressor. So left to right, compressor, negative 40 on the threshold, negative 40.8, attack is 51%, release at 20. Band number 2, negative 21.81, attack is 49.8, release is at 17.5. Third band is going to be negative 26.68, attack at 48.5, and release is going to be at 0%. Our band on the fourth one, threshold is going to be negative 24.56. Attack is going to be 47.2, release at 23.3, and the last band is going to be negative 46.01, attack 37.3, and the release at 7.7. Let's take a quick listen. I'll just go ahead and play with it. So really pulling down on those mids and really trying to hold on to those low end frequencies when hitting that lower note. All right, what's going to be our next plugin here? Looks like we're using 1176. This time we are using the black version of it. We're not using the blue ribbon. Let's see, our input is going to be negative 30. Output is 22. Attack is 3.98. Release is at 6.6. Ratio at 4. Again, we already talked about which one we're using, the black. And let's take a quick listen. And just overall covering the full dynamics of the guitar itself. So whoops, let's go ahead and put that clip back. What's our next plugin here? Looks like we're using our chorus again, but as you can see, we are using a lot more we're adding a lot more of that chorus to the mix. All these settings are the same as they were before, so I won't discuss that, but we have raised the chorus mix to 22%. Let's go ahead and take a listen to what that is doing now. Why can't I hear it? Oh, because I'm playing the wrong section. Here we go. Without. And with. So just giving a little bit more of a stereo image. And let's look at these last few plugins we have here. We have a delay. No surprise, especially with these sections. We want to make it a little bit more ambient. Sounds like it's in a more distant spot. So we have it 35% on each side, left and right channel. Feedback at 30%. It looks like we're using, what is that, a quarter note on one side. And it looks like this was supposed to be like a quarter note, but I raised it a little bit above just to give it a little bit of an offset. And yeah, let's take a listen. Sounding really good. Should be no surprise what reverb we're going to use with a clean guitar to get more of an ambient sound. Valhalla Shimmer. Great sounding plugin. All right, 15% is all we're using. Shift is at 12. Feedback is at 0. Diffusion is 0.91. The size of the room, we've turned it down to 0.26. Low cut is at 10. High cut is at 8,000. Mod rate is at 0.59. And the depth is going to be 0.3. It's set to mono right now. We could change it if we want to. It's fine with mono for me though. Pitch is on single and the color mode is going to be bright. Let's take a listen. Yeah, sounds great. Last plugin is going to be the S1 Imager. This is a plugin by Waves that actually is able to take your sound and give it a little bit more of a stereo image. So all you do, let me go ahead and make sure I don't forget what we have it here. It's at 1.78, but if we bring that down to the default of 1 and I press play, it's not going to sound any different than it did before. It's just going to be the same natural sound. Great, but if I turn this down all the way, it now takes what is a stereo sound and makes it mono. So even though you can still hear the reverb and the delay, you're not hearing it on the left and right channels. And now the same thing is true when we go in the opposite direction though. Well, not the same thing, but the opposite happens when we go in the other direction, where we're actually going to increase the stereo image. So I'm gonna set this back to, what was it, 1.78, and let's take a listen to what this is doing. Sounds really, really good, especially with those delays. When you hear that delay kick in, you really hear that imaging going on. And that's all the guitars. So let's take a quick moment to listen to a section where all these are playing. So we're gonna go from this section here, and just that way we can hear all three of those guitars. Excellent. That's a great point to stop right there. So congratulations, we're done with all the drums, we're done with all the bass and guitars. Now we get to do the fun stuff like adding the different the different synthesizers and electronic drums and those different effects. So let's go ahead and look at those. So this is going to actually be the easiest section of the mixing. We didn't do anything to the pad or the choir. That's right, aside from turning it down in Contact, we didn't do anything else. So let's take a quick moment to hear what those pad and choir sound like all together. Now they might be very quiet because remember, they were -20, but it's just to add a little bit of space in addition to what's going on with the clean guitar. So let's take a quick listen. And you can probably hear it's just adding a little bit of additional texture. You know, it's just playing those fundamental chords that the guitar is playing, but just sustaining notes. And that was it. Told you that was going to be the easiest section. Nothing we had to do there. All right, now let's go ahead and look at the electronic drums. What we did here looks like another quick, easy section. I'm going to just go ahead and solo these. Yep, and our toms as well. Yep, that's right. Let's go ahead and start at that point. For the kick, looks like we use the lo-fi. I believe we discussed this in the last video. Lo-fi, we're just using here to add a little bit of a different type of texture to the sound. So let's just actually solo this kick drum and listen to what it is doing. So making it sound very 8-bit, actually 9-bit in this situation, as you can see here. We also have the sample rate. It's at 22,000. Yeah, about 22,000 hertz, and the anti-alias at 0%. I think we might have done the same thing for the snare. Let's see if we adjusted it. Yep, snare is the exact same thing. And it looks like I actually have these being routed over to the drum verb, which makes sense too for the intro. We want to be able to add a little bit of space to it so that way it's not just such a dry sound. Our toms though, or hi-hat, we didn't do anything. For our toms though, it looks like we did quite a bit of cutting, making sure that it wasn't too overbearing. So it looks like we did -7.8 at 425 hertz and then -9.47 at 2,607 hertz. So let's take a listen to what these sound like all together now. And let's go ahead and just go from here. So again, we removed a lot of that body from the toms, but we're leaving at least the attack on there so we can hear that poke through. Again, we want to make sure it's not overbearing. And let's go ahead and move on to what I think is one of my favorite sections, which is going to be dealing with the impacts. Now, these are also going to be really easy because aside from setting the volume, we didn't do anything else. What we could do is if we're really concerned that they're making the mix too muddy, we can add things like an EQ and a compressor. The EQ to kind of maybe do a cutoff at like, let's say 20 hertz to make sure it's not interfering with the kick or the bass. For me, I think we got away with it just by simply setting it at the right volume. So let's take a listen to this. And it's very, very subtle. You might not even be able to hear that because of how quiet it is. Now let's try to listen to it again. See if you catch that. Great, okay. Now let's go ahead and look at our other elements here that we're using. So we have the gunshot, but it looks like we're using shimmer. I believe we did that with the cymbal as well. The reason why I'll add reverb to some of these as well is to have, yeah, that nice kind of sustaining tail. It takes a little bit of the attack away from it as well. So that way, if you're trying to adjust the volume and you're kind of in between this place of where like, if it's audible, it sounds like it's too much, but if I turn it down to a point, it just sounds like I can't hear it at all. This is sometimes a way how to get around that, where you just kind of, you know, are taming the attack a little bit by adding just a touch of reverb. So on the gunshot, we have 0.09. On the cymbal is going to be 0.14. And then let's look at this sound of the gun being loaded or cocked, whatever is the proper term for it. So it looks like we are actually doing some multi-band compression, left to right. Let's do this. So -18 decibels on band 1 with 20 on the attack, 20 on the release. Band 2 is -18 as well, 20 on both those attack and release. Threshold is going to be -36.1, attack at 49.1, release at 11.9. Fourth band is going to be negative 30.88. Attack is 41.9. Release is 13.6. And then our last band here is going to be negative 30.39 with an attack of 41.4 and a release of 11.7. So let's go ahead. What we're going to do now is listen to this all together, just the effects really quickly, and then we'll go ahead and bring it into the mix. And that way, maybe let's see if you guys can hear that effect that it's bringing, that type of dramatic sound. And you can hear that reverb, what it's doing, allowing it to sustain a little bit and kind of lessening the attack. Let's hear it with the mix. All right, and that's what it sounds like. Again, adjust these accordingly. If you think that these are too quiet and you might be able to get away with having a little bit more audible but you want to control the EQ and the dynamics of it, please feel free to do so. This is just the decisions that I made at the time when I was recreating this song. And guys, congratulations. We are through almost everything. We are at the last part where all we need to do is cover the master bus, okay? Now, this section will get loud, so just be sure to go ahead and adjust your volume on your monitors or headphones accordingly, okay? I want you guys blowing out your ears. So I'm gonna go ahead and take a second to do that. All right, so now that you've adjusted your volume, let's go ahead and run through the plugins that we're using on the master bus. This one should be no surprise. We're going ahead and using the NLS from Waves. We're using actually the channel, not the mix bus. This is going to be the Waves, the Waves mic, and it's going to be the preset number 1, and that's going to be emulating that first channel, like we talked about in the other video, of that console, and that's going to be both stereo left and right. Okay, so let's take a listen to what that is doing. Bypassed. Sounds really good. Just adding a little bit of that console texture across all of the instruments that are going through it. So it sounds good. We also have another one we're using. Again, the API. Why is this a surprise to you guys? I love this thing. Again, you don't need it if you don't have it. You could probably just get away honestly with just the NSL if you want to, or try using maybe a mixture of different ones, different plugins if you want to. But this might not be necessary. But let's just take a quick listen. Starting without. Sounds really, really good. All right, our compressor, we're actually using a compressor called Goliath. Really unique compressor. I like it a lot. I don't use it all the time, but I mean, aside from the fact that it looks cool, it sounds really good. So let's run through what the presets are here. So, and again, if you don't have this, because I understand not everyone will have all these plugins, try using like maybe the SSL or some of the Slate plugins as well. Whatever compressor you think will sound good. Honestly, when it comes to me trying to decide what type of compressor I want to use on the master bus, again, I am not a mastering engineer, so my word is only as valid things are, but not really. I don't know what I'm saying about that. But anyways, the point is that feel free to explore. So our input is going to be at -20. The mix is going to be at, looks like 33%. The output is going to be at -1.9. The tone we have to set, it's set to silver. It looks like for the envelope section, we have it on. We have the motion set more to splat. It's at 15%. We have a fast attack, and it's going to be at 1 millisecond. The release is going to be at 17.7 milliseconds. The EQ section is on, but we have not touched anything whatsoever on this, so we've left that alone. And let's see, again, the mix is at 33%, so it's not going to be 100%. Let's take a listen to what this is doing without and with. It's a little subtle because again, we're only using 33%, but from what I'm hearing there, it's adding a little bit more energy by kind of squishing the dynamics down on that quote unquote parallel tracks that we're kind of bringing back into it with the mix knob there. And then lastly, again, we have our Ozone Pro, final warning here, it will get louder. So just adjust your volume. I'm doing it one more time for myself here. But I just simply use, again, the master assistant. My approach to this, because I'm not a mastering engineer, will just use the mastering assistant. And if I feel like it's making a huge dramatic change, that might tell me that I need to go back into my mix and try to approach things differently, because it's really forcing the plugin to have to make these huge changes to make it sound to what it thinks would be best. So what I simply do is, if it's a subtle change, I will then move forward and make adjustments accordingly. So let's go ahead and run through it, and then we'll press play, okay? So for the EQ, it looks like there's a slight boost here of only 0.2, and that's at 22 hertz. Kind of makes sense because, again, I got rid of a lot of lower frequencies, maybe reintroduced them with those console emulations, but it's just adding a little bit there at 22 hertz. Dynamics, we have nothing on. Our EQ, though, we have some changes that are going on. I think they might be kind of subtle, though. So it looks like at 100 hertz, we're doing only a gain of 0.6. It looks like at the second band, we're doing -1 at 870 hertz. It's kind of a wider band, covering pretty much from almost, looks like maybe between 200 all the way to about maybe 4K. So kind of cutting the mids a little bit there. Interesting. And then on the last band, it looks like we have 0.6 dB at 6K. So, and that's going to be a shelf. So it's raising everything there. So if you look at it, even though these are very subtle moves, we're doing no more than a dB of change. It's kind of scooping out the mids a bit and bringing back the highs and the lows. Now let's go ahead and take a look at our dynamic EQ, what it's doing. So it looks like we have a threshold of -25.8. and the frequency is going to be at 222 with a gain of -4. The next band is going to be, I'll start left to right this time, sorry. Frequency is going to be at 1,164, -4 gain, threshold at -30. Fourth band is going to be at 5,165 hertz at -4 dB, and that's going to be a threshold of -29.3. And the last band is going to be -2, and the frequency is going to be at 4,663. So I'm going to go ahead and play this back really quickly here. Let's take the, let's do a little bit of a different section. Let's do this intro. This was being played at the intro, so let's take a quick listen. I want to see what it's doing with this dynamic EQ. So you can see it's really pulling down on those frequencies when the snare is hitting. It looks like it's trying to tame those cymbals as well, but it sounds really good. I'm really happy with the way this turned out. And last thing is just the maximizer, which is essentially setting a volume. Looks like the ceiling for this one, opposed to like what happened with Wage War Low, we do have the ceiling at -1. And I think this was something that I learned after I did the Wage War video. And remember, I mixed that, or I made that recreation like over a year ago. I was learning more about these different platforms, YouTube, Spotify. I went ahead and put this at -1 just to leave me enough ceiling when we go ahead and, you know, post these, these recreations. So, but the threshold's at -9. The IRC is 4, and it's set to classic. And that's it, guys. There's nothing more. We have, congratulations. We have finished going through the recreation of Memphis Mayfire's Only Human. Now, like what happened with the previous video, I cannot play the full mix in its entirety, because if I do so, then I will have to deal with YouTube and a copyright claim. I understand the reason as to why for it. It's kind of sad because, again, I would like for us to be able to enjoy it. So what I'm going to say is this: if you want to hear the full mix in entirety, I'm going to go ahead and leave a time card and also maybe a section in the description to link you to that video of the mix that I did. Also, moving forward, tell me what you guys think about this. To make those videos a little bit more engaging, probably what I'll do is do kind of a bit of a reaction and share with you guys what my thoughts and opinions are without too much commentary, for you guys to be able to listen to what those mixes sound like, and that way you're still being able to listen to it and also get those download resources at the same time. So again, thank you so much. And lastly, before you leave, do not forget to subscribe, leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and also if you have some critiques or criticism, or you want to say good job or make any recommendations of what we should be doing on the channel here, leave a comment. I look at all of them. I do my best to respond to all of them. Might take me a little bit of time. I got my own day job that I do too, but again, this is my passion. This is what I love to do, and I love helping out the community here to be able to give them these samples to be able to, again, sharpen your skills and work on fun songs that people know about. So I have some really cool stuff coming up. So again, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. Thank you so much, and have a great day.